So thanks everyone for joining. Looking forward very much to share with you today this exciting new partnership between SimilarWeb and G2. And today we're going to be looking at how to optimize our sales process through the use of signals. So we all know that data kind of is key in driving an optimized sales process. But the question I often hear is how? How do I apply data effectively to optimize my sales process? So today we're going to talk about the concept of signals, which is exactly that, applying data to the sales process to drive optimization.
Awesome. And before we get started, we wanted to go through a few housekeeping notes. So if you guys actually have any questions throughout the webinar that you'd like us to answer, just put it in the Q&A function and we'll get to them after the conversation if we have time. And then secondly, we are going to be recording this webinar. So if you'd like to share it or rewatch it, you'll get that on November 2nd. So I'm going to pass it over to Greg to introduce himself.
Perfect. Thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Brocklehurst. I lead strategy at SimilarWeb and have kind of many years experience in helping customers to optimize their go-to-market approach through the application of data. So obviously, most recently at SimilarWeb, that is how you can apply web and market intelligence data to influence and optimize your sales process, and then previously worked in management consulting, doing the same on behalf of many different clients. And I really believe kind of the best type of data analytics is one where you can apply it effectively to grow your business. I'll just pass over to Caitlin to introduce herself.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm actually really excited to be here. Also, apologies for any city sounds you hear in the background. But a little bit of background about me. I am currently over at G2 on the product marketing team. And kind of throughout my career, I've been in product marketing, also a little bit of marketing strategy. But I actually got my start as a sales development rep, or back in the day, we were called marketing development reps over at a tech company. So I'm actually really excited to kind of get into the content that we're going to be talking about today, because 5 years ago, Caitlin would have absolutely loved all the tips we're going to be talking about and probably would have used them in her own prospecting activities. So let's kind of get into it. Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about the agenda and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the screen here, we've got just a few key points about what we're going to cover. We're going to talk a lot about the buying journey today. So the process that your prospects and your customers go through in their life cycle with you. And we're going to think about the different signals that we have available to us and how they effectively slot into that buying journey. We're then going to take it like the next step underneath and think about how actually can you take the signals that you have today and actually slot them into your current workflow so you can start making them effective from day one. Yeah. So that's the high level agenda there. And I'm going to pass over to Caitlin now.
Cool.
Yeah, who's
Awesome. So we actually thought as a good starting point that we could talk a little bit about the mindset of today's buyer. And so this 95% up here, I'm going to throw a stat at you. So according to Propeller CRM, about 95% of buyers are saying that they're going with organizations that can provide relevant and informative content at each part of the buyer's journey. So that pretty much means that buyers today are looking for information that is connected directly to the specific circumstances that they're dealing with and the buying journey that they're kind of doing themselves. But I think one of the conundrums we probably see as sales professionals and also marketing professionals is prospects, and a lot of times our buyers or our customers also very rarely kind of lay out their cards and tell us what they want and what they need. And as a sales rep, especially, you're probably left trying to figure out and read the minds of the buyers that you're trying to engage with, even if you haven't engaged with them in the first place. So any thoughts on this, Greg, too, on the mind of the buyer currently?
Yeah, I mean, I think that completely resonates with me, Caitlin. I think what I'll add to that is that buyers have more information and choice than ever. And while this is very empowering for them and helps them make the right decision, actually on the other side of the coin, it can also be incredibly overwhelming. So I think never, therefore, has it been more critical to deliver the right relevant information to the buyer at the right time. I also think we see that kind of the world of business is rapidly changing. I mean, especially with COVID at the moment, and it's really accelerating those digital transformations that customers see. And by digital transformations, I mean really the way that companies are interacting with their customers. And I think if you're selling a product or service that helps, for example, optimize online transactions or something, it means that some customers who may not have been relevant for your business before, for example, a bricks and mortar retailer, might now be in desperate need to grow their e-commerce presence or accelerate their revenue from online as they see shutdowns around the world. So, I think for me, it's also therefore it's never been more critical to continually use the signals that we're going to discuss today to find the most relevant buyers for you and ensure you're going after the prospects and customers that can get the most value from your solution. So actually talking of the acceleration driven by COVID, we have a short quiz poll for you. So according to SimilarWeb web data, what category of e-commerce do you think has seen the biggest gain from September 2019 to September 20? Office equipment, pets, food and drink, or home and garden? What do you think?
It's a toughie. It's a toughie, I think I'm thinking about just working from home and like where I am and what I've spent my money on. So I'm going to have to go with office equipment. We'll see if I'm right, but I think that's what I'm going to go with.
Cool. I think one of the main learnings for me from COVID was desk chairs are much more expensive than you would expect.
They're so expensive. I just got one that I'm unpacking right now, but I realized how much it was. I'm like, oh no, but it will be well worth it. My back will appreciate it later. So
exactly. Cool. So 42% of us thought it was home and garden, followed by 39% in food and drink. So let's see which one. So correct, the majority was home and garden, which saw an almost 50% increase in traffic, which obviously is huge. So people have obviously been using the time at home to do that much needed DIY.
Not me. I am the opposite. My sister's the one doing that. I am just watching TV all day. So very interesting stuff though. So I think now we should probably kind of get into talking a little bit about all of these signals we've been kind of putting through in our talks. But Greg, did you want to kind of talk about the intent signals and maybe a way that we can comprehensively and contextually think about them?
Yeah, sure. So I think in this presentation, we're going to talk about kind of two main types of signals. So we have many different types of signals, but I really see that we can put these into two main buckets. So first, we have passive signals. So these are mainly some indication about your customer that they're a good fit for your product or service. It's not so much your customer is doing something specific that shows they're a good fit. It's just something about who they are, maybe what their web traffic is, or what industry they belong to, what market they normally sell to. Not specifically signaling that they're ready to buy, but there's a characteristic of them that means that you can offer them some value. These are kind of great for finding customers that, as I said, can get value, but maybe they don't even know you exist yet. So this is actually perfect for outbound and finding that proactively reaching out to those customers. We then have active signals. So these are mainly where customers are exhibiting a certain behavior that suggests they're interested in your product or service. So if we take the most obvious level of this signal, it could be a customer filling out a form on your website to say, I want a meeting with sales. Obviously, that's the best type of signal to have, but we don't always get that. So there's many other signals of these active signals we can use throughout the buying journey. So for example, when a customer is considering their options, there's some signals we can use around, have they visited the G2 category page, for example, which they're showing a signal that they're starting to look and think about kind of different vendors. And this now brings me nicely on to the buying journey of how we can use those signals at each stage. And I'm going to pass over to Caitlin, who's going to give us a quick overview to that buying journey.
Yeah. And I actually really love the active and passive kind of way to bucket these, because I think we see so many different signals that you can use as a marketer or a salesperson. So kind of thinking it from a passive and an active standpoint, I think makes it a little easier to make sense of them in your brain. But I think one of the questions we hear a lot at G2 is there are all of these signals, but how are you supposed to be able to find the true intention and make sense of what these signals really mean in terms of a buyer making a decision or a behavior? So I think the simple answer to this and the easiest way to do this is to actually contextualize these signals you're seeing within the buying journey, because someone that's in stage one that's looking at a category signal or a category page, for example, might have a different intention to somebody that's actually a customer already. So if you think in terms of the stages of the buying journey, it makes it a lot easier to understand those intentions. So I'm actually going to walk you guys through a quick analogy for a second to show you what I really mean. So it might come as a surprise, but the buying journey is actually very, very similar to dating. I know you guys are probably like, whoa, Caitlin, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you talking about? But I think it actually really shows that there are so many different milestones in terms of the different parts of the buying journey. So for example, when you're in the awareness and discovery stage as a dater, you might sign up for an app, for example, start swiping, but you don't really know what you're looking for. You might be just doing it, not expecting much out of it. And then on the buying journey side, from an awareness standpoint, it's all about kind of letting prospects know that you're out there and actually telling them and maybe showing them that they might have a problem worth solving, right? So when we go down to the next stage, which is the interest and engagement stage, as a dater, you might have gotten a match from that app that you've been using, and you might start engaging with somebody via text message. But ultimately, you're trying to figure out if it makes sense for you to do a date, probably a virtual one, during this time. But essentially, you're trying to suss out if it makes sense to continue talking. And I think on the buying journey side, in terms of interest and engagement, this is the time that we really want to try to get prospects to raise their hand and say that they wanted to learn more about us, either through a form fill on a demo page or a contact us form, what have you, but essentially some indication that they are interested in learning more about us. And then if you go over to the right one more stage, to stage 3, which is decision, on the dating side, this is when you've potentially done a date with somebody and you continue to talk to them, do more dates, what have you. But essentially what you're trying to do is try to suss out if this is somebody that you want to continue a relationship with and build on those foundational elements that you had started with. And it's very similar on the buying journey side. So this is when a vendor is trying to understand if you're truly somebody that will make a good partner for them, or if somebody that is on the competitor or one of your competitors could potentially be a better match, and essentially want a prospect to sign a deal at the end of this stage. And then lastly, we've got the retention and expansion phase. And similarly to when you're working on a relationship, maybe in the outside world and trying to grow and support each other, it's the same thing on the buying journey side. So it's all about kind of driving a really great experience for a customer and making sure that they're seeing a good ROI. And then on their side, they want to see a good ROI and have a good experience to ensure that they want to continue renewing with you. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about the different milestones within each stage, we're actually going to take a deeper dive and look into each of the different stages and specifically what the intent signals you might want to look for and what they might mean. And so for the sake of time, we're actually going to put awareness and engagement, so stage 1 and stage 2 together. But if you'd like to see these stages built out or kind of separated more specifically, SimilarWeb actually released a white paper that does that really nicely. So to start, Greg, is there any kind of specific mindset that a buyer in the awareness and engagement stage has and that we should keep in mind?
Yeah, so I think at the awareness and engagement stage, really the buyer's going through a few different thought processes here. So kind of firstly, at the very elementary level, they must first recognize that they have a problem that they need to solve. And I'm using problem very broadly there. It could be simple as they want to optimize their revenue, or they want to grow their business, kind of very basic needs of any type of business. It could be that they must recognize that depending on what you're selling, that they have a more specific problem. It's really dependent on the solution that you're selling. I think at this stage of awareness, we can still use signals to find these customers and proactively reach out to them. So this is really where our passive signals come in to actually identify the problems that identify the prospects that maybe have a pain that they don't know they have yet, but we can help fix because we have a solution for. I think then when they move to more the engagement phase, the prospects here They've realized they have a problem and they're starting to think about solutions to that problem. So that solutions to that problem could be, for example, an internal change they need to make or some internal optimization. But customers might also start to think about external vendors that they could work with who would help them optimize their business or solve for that problem or business pain that they're facing. So if we just move on and we'll start to think about the signals again in those two buckets that we have here. So the signals that you use here or in, we're going to show a lot of signals throughout this presentation, but the signals you use will be different depending on your business. And it's really important, I think, to think about what value your product or service is providing to your end user and who the ideal type of customer for the value, who the ideal customer for that value is. And that will really help you think about the signals that are most relevant in each situation. So if we just think about the passive signals in the awareness phase or the engagement and awareness phase, there's actually a large number of passive signals at this stage. And here's just kind of a few examples of them. So maybe we have web traffic and engagement metrics. If customers are experiencing declining web traffic, for example, perhaps that is they're experiencing a problem with customer acquisition. Do you sell a product or service that can help them fix that? Maybe advertising, for example. Maybe we see customers getting traffic from a new market. So again, this is where I spoke about the problem not so much being always a problem, but maybe they get traffic from a new market. Your the prospects aren't really doing anything with that, but you can actually help them monetize it. So maybe if you're a logistics company or a payments company, you can help them ship parcels to those consumers that are interested in a new market or accept payments from them as well. That's increasing their total addressable market. So that's a great example of how a customer maybe hasn't recognized they have this optimization or pain, but you actually have a solution for it. We have a few others here as well. So, tech stack changes can indicate changes in, budgets, or if they install a new type of technology that you integrate with, maybe that's also a good, a way for them to better optimize an investment they've already made. So those are just like a few of the different passive signals there. There's many, many more that you will have depending on the business you're in. But we'll just deep dive on one of them quickly. So change in customer web traffic here. So what we're seeing here is that we're seeing there's two websites, which is Pret and Wagamama's, both food retailers. And we can see Pret has had an almost 300% increase in web traffic month over month, whereas Wagamama's has experienced more than a 50% decrease. So obviously two companies in similar industries, but experiencing kind of a very different trajectory. How you interpret the signal actually really depends on what you sell yourself. So if you're selling customer support software, maybe Pret is a great one for you to reach out to. They're probably, with more customers, they're probably experiencing much higher support volumes, which is making it difficult for them to support those customers, which might come at the degradation of customer experience. Maybe you can help them manage that risk. On the other side, if you are selling advertising or display advertising, maybe Wagamama's is a great fit for you. They've experienced a decline in traffic, which is a business pain for them. And actually you can help them quickly grow that traffic again, so it doesn't affect their bottom line. So here we're looking at like a pretty basic signal, but actually it can be interpreted in multiple different ways as well. So that was just like a quick example of one of the passive signals. And now we'll deep dive a bit on the active signals. So I'll pass over to Caitlin to run us through these.
Perfect. And similarly to the passive signals, we're only showing a couple here, but there are so many that could be valuable, especially at the awareness and engagement phase. And just for anybody that's not familiar with G2, we are a B2B software marketplace. So a lot of these examples are for B2B, just so you kind of have that in your mind as well. So on the active signal side, here are a few that you might want to kind of keep your eyes out for. So a G2 profile visit, which is actually a signal that occurs when a prospective company views your G2 profile page. And this is where all of your reviews live and all of the kind of information about your company lives as well. So this action from a prospect might show some early indication of interest in your company. I'd actually probably recommend, if you see this signal only one time in your notifications or in my G2, to maybe not reach out just yet. But if you see a profile visit that's happening a lot of times, or that is kind of compounded with other signals, it might be a really good opportunity for you to start the conversation. And then next we have the G2 category visit signal, which I'm actually going to talk about in a little bit during our spotlight. So I'm not going to spend too much time, but this is a really important one to talk about in the awareness and engagement stage as well. And then we have the G2 alternatives or comparison page visit, which this is a really great one to kind of see if you are even in the running in terms of early kind of intention or interest of a customer. So important to kind of know who your competition is early on. And then finally, kind of visiting your pricing page. This could also be an early indication of somebody interested in learning more about your company, and if you maybe make sense for the problem they're looking to solve and what you offer as well. And I think it's also important to note here, and Greg kind of mentioned this as well in the passive signals, is while we're really talking about how you can engage with these folks and the ways that you can do this, you can also use these signals to kind of start building a database of in-market buyers, especially when you get into that engagement kind of component of the buying stage. So let's go over to category signals. So I kind of think of category signals as the kind of the nerdiest ones. They're fun. I think they're really interesting. I honestly think all of the signals are super interesting. But the category signal, for those not familiar, is actually a signal that's surfaced when somebody visits a category page specifically, or a company visits a category page specifically. So this page actually hosts a wealth of information for a buyer, including the G2 grid, which shows kind of the rankings and positions of products within the category, and then also the listings of all the products that are within this category. So if you're on the hunt for information as a customer, this page is super valuable. And if you see somebody going to this page multiple times and continuing to revisit, and again, looking at your profile page or conducting comparisons, you can really tell that they're kind of in the research mode, and it might be time for you to maybe reach out and maybe be a trusted advisor, which we're going to talk about in a second. Cool. And so we're going to actually pass it over to Greg, and he's going to talk about a real life example of how a customer has kind of leveraged signals in this stage.
Thanks, Caitlin. So what we thought we'd do here is really, we wanted to try and bring the signals that we're talking about here to life, to just spotlight on a few different customers and how they actually use these signals to get value throughout their sales cycle. So the first one we're going to talk about here is Simpler. So Simpler is they help customers manage variable support workloads. So if you're a business which has a lot of seasonality, or you suddenly get a spike in traffic, let's think maybe airlines at the beginning of COVID when there was a lot of cancellations, and maybe your current operations team wouldn't be able to manage all the requests. They actually step in and help you manage some of that workload through sort of outsourcing and technology. So the sales team at Simpler, their goal is to really understand from their prospects what the quantity of customer interaction is. So what they do is they look for various different signals. These are mainly passive signals at that prospect. So they look for example, traffic growth. If they see companies which have seen a huge spike in traffic over the last month or so, they might start to reach out to them to see if Simpler would be of value to them. With the example we saw there of Prep, could be a good fit. They also look for companies with significant seasonality. So companies that maybe around the holidays get a large spike in traffic. That means it's not worth them employing a full-time customer support team, but actually working with a vendor like Simpler to manage that variable workload. They also understand, based on their ideal customer profile, who a good fit for them is. So, they know that maybe like technology and digital companies are a good fit. So they use the signal of an industry that a customer is in to actually understand if a prospect would be a good fit as well. So that was kind of just a real life example here. And if we move on to the next slide, we're going to see actually how we can bring all this together. So the signals that we've had, and what we've done here is this is just an example of how for example, Simpler, might put some of those signals into a customer communication to reach out, get a foot in the door, maybe get a meeting. So we can see, you know, they start the email here with the passive signal to really demonstrate that they know the business and make it a really customized outreach. So they say, I notice you've grown your web traffic to your online store more than 200%. They then go on to say, did you know, like, congratulations, but did you know actually this rapid growth can cause some unexpected consequences in your customer experience as well. So they're kind of they're showing why they're reaching out, and they're putting the seed of like the need for their services in the head of the prospect. They then proceed as they go through, and they move on to actually an active signal, which Caitlin's going to talk about now.
Cool. And kind of using the category signal as the example signal here. So again, if you know that a customer is kind of in the curiosity and research mode phase, you can really craft a message that really kind of establishes yourself as a player in the field, one, but then also as a trusted advisor. And I think this is something that I've especially gotten more interested in as I've been working at G2. But there's really a great opportunity early in the stages of the buying journey to become an advisor and somebody that is providing unbiased information about a category and kind of helping somebody through the buyer's journey and kind of helping them gain confidence. So this is kind of an example of a way to lightly kind of get your foot in the door and also kind of establish yourself as a go-to for any kind of resources they might want in the buying journey in the future. So we're going to move down to the decision and purchase stage. So the decision and purchase stage is essentially when somebody is already in talks with your team, right? So you probably have an open opportunity with them. And from the buyer's perspective, they're really trying to vet you out and see if you're the right person for the job and if you are the partner that they want to continue with and essentially sign a deal for. So leveraging intent signals at this point in the buying journey, while I think it typically is not super popular, it can actually be super valuable, especially for a sales rep, because it enables you to essentially provide relevant information because you know kind of where your buyer's mind is at and kind of how you can help them, again, move through the stages effectively and efficiently. So I'm actually going to start with a case study here. So I actually had the opportunity to sit down with one of our customers, Digital River, and we were interviewing them about buyer intent in general. And one of the things that we actually talked to them about was that their sales team actually really focuses on leveraging buyer intent signals in kind of the middle stages of the buying journey, because it really helps their sales teams create conversations that are, again, relevant and make them more efficient. And I think you're probably thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but does it really make sense for me to build out talking points and a general engagement strategy if I'm only getting a few signals during this kind of stage of the buying journey? But what we actually found during the time of the interview with Digital River was that 22% of their closed won deals had at least one G2 interaction, AKA a signal was occurring. And then secondly, the 22% of their current open opportunities had at least one G2 interaction. So a quarter of the folks that they were engaging with were engaging with these signals. So they were actually able to build out talking points and, again, helping their sales reps kind of move folks through the funnel efficiently and effectively. It was really great. So obviously there's definitely a lot of power in terms of these signals. So let's kind of talk about the specific signals that are relevant to this decision and purchase stage. Did you want to go through the passive signals, Greg?
Yeah, sure. So here, it's really thinking about, for me, the passive signals are really thinking about, if you think about the stage that you're at with the customer, they've already some interest, you've probably had a conversation, so you've established that there's some sort of value that you can provide to them. So the signals here for me are really about thinking two things. One is, how can you add additional value? How is your solution or your product even more valuable than the customer first anticipated? So that could be, for example, looking at if you're selling software, looking at the current tech stack of the company and saying, oh, actually, we have pre-built integrations for several of the tools that they're already using, which inherently increases the value of the product because it reduces the barriers to entry, the integration costs are lower, etc. You also then can use signals here to help you accelerate the sales process as well. So actually using some signals, perhaps from one of their competitors, to create a compelling event, for example. So showing maybe how one of their competitors is better optimized. If you're selling a product that helps improve conversion, how is one of the direct competitors converting better, and how is your product going to help them get up or exceed that of their competitor? And I'd just like to quickly jump into an example we have there around showing a competitive insight. So here, imagine we're pitching imagine we're Digital River and we're selling a payment solution, for example, and we know that offering our payment solution or multiple payment options increases conversion at the end of the funnel. Say we're pitching to boohoo.com. What we're looking at in this chart here, which you can generate in SimilarWeb, is how many visits Boohoo get, and then their conversion rate as well. And we're comparing them to ASOS. So what this chart shows is that ASOS gets more visits to their website and they're better at converting them. If I was a stakeholder at Boohoo responsible for conversions, obviously I'd want to take note here, and I'd be like, oh, actually, I knew we had a problem with conversions, but I didn't quite know how bad it was or how pressing this issue was. So let's accelerate this fix that we're putting into place. It just increases the pressure a little bit to take that solution as well. So kind of wanted to share that with you there. And let's move over to look at what are some of the the active signals we can use at this stage as well.
Cool. Yeah, and I think as a buyer too, when you see something kind of more concrete and quantitative, it makes you want to take an action more. So that would definitely get me shaking in my boots a little bit as a marketer. So on the active signals side of the house, some active signals that you really might want to focus on in terms of the decision and purchase phase are going to kind of include, again, pretty similar ones to what we talked about at awareness and engagement, but they're going to have slightly different interpretations, right? So a G2 profile visit could actually indicate that your prospect is interested in kind of hearing from your customers, right? Because the G2 profile page has your reviews. They have everything that kind of your customers think about your product specifically, and they might be trying to figure out if you should be kind of the person that they go to, and you should be the final choice. And then on the G2 comparison page visits, we're going to be talking about these in a second, so don't want to give away too much right now, but these are really important, especially in the decision phase as well. And then finally, filling out a contact us form. Obviously, this is probably why they're in this stage in the first place. But again, this provides you with a really strong indication that somebody's really interested in learning more about you and specifically about what you can offer to them. And as you compound and add these signals together again, you're going to be able to tell a stronger story with what your buyer has in their mind while they're moving through the stages. So let's actually move to the comparison page signals. So we actually did a little survey earlier this summer, and we found that the comparison page signals for sales and marketing professionals was actually kind of the most important and most valuable in terms of the signals that they had available to them. And I think that probably comes as no surprise, because as we saw in Greg's example as well, competitive intel is extremely valuable for folks, and if they can get their hands on it earlier in the phases of the buyer journey and in the middle when they're trying to make a decision, it's really going to help them make an effective and confident decision in the long run. So for anybody that's not familiar with the G2 comparison page, this essentially is a page that allows a customer to, or a prospect rather, to directly compare multiple products at the same time. So when you're in the decision and purchase phase, it's really valuable to be able to have this signal available to you, because you're actually getting a bird's eye view as to who is your direct competition with your opportunity you're trying to work. So when you have this kind of information and you know exactly who those folks are, it's going to make it a lot easier for you as a salesperson to position effectively and to adjust your messaging, so you're not trying to boil the ocean in terms of your competitive landscape and talking against it, but you can, again, really just provide the information that your customer needs in order to make a confident buying decision. And so we're gonna go over to some examples of messaging using both passive and active signals. So I'm going to pass it over to Greg to walk through the passive signal.
So just keeping with that Boohoo ASOS example here. So what we're doing here is we're just putting insight into the email. So for example, Boohoo has seen a decrease in traffic in the French market year on year, whereas ASOS, your direct competitor, has seen a 280% increase. So it just creates kind of a little bit of pressure to optimize the business in that certain market. Obviously, the signal that you'd want to put in here is relevant to the value or the optimization you can provide. But it's really just about showing them that kind of competitive insight and benchmarking. Sometimes you can do this against just the industry as well, which is also super powerful. Yeah, so it's just kind of a gentle nudge of just reminding you of why what you're purchasing is important and is going to help you optimize and grow your business as well.
And on the active signal side, again, kind of taking that comparison signal example as well, this is a really great opportunity to kind of craft a message, again, that's really pointed and relevant to your customer or your prospect rather. I think one of the things I might kind of err away against is I probably wouldn't want to create a message that says, I saw that you were on G2 at 2:34 p.m. and you were comparing me against two other people. Let's talk about these two people. You can probably do something a little more nuanced where you're kind of establishing and acknowledging that you do have competition and you know who your direct competition is. But again, kind of leaning into the fact that you're a leader of the category and giving them some confidence with any kind of customer voice kind of content, like case studies, again, the reviews on your G2 profile page, a reference page, what have you. So again, kind of getting that confidence up and kind of letting your customers speak for you at this point, because you have kind of gone through over half of the journey. Now it's time for kind of your customers to speak with you, and that social proof is really, really valuable here. Cool. And so we're moving down to the last stage of the buying journey. I'm so sad. But I do like retain and expand. This is a really fun one. So obviously retention and expansion is all about working with the customers, the folks that have signed contracts, that have wanted to continue their relationship with you. And again, you're really focused on ensuring that their experience is really great while they're a customer. And in the buyer's mind, they're obviously wanting to have a really good experience, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to want some ROI, and they want to be able to be confident in continuing their partnership with you and constantly renewing. So let's actually go to a customer story real quick before we go into intent signals to kind of talk about the stage. Greg?
Well, yeah, so just wanted to kick it off here with an example of one of our customers that I actually think is making really good use of data at this stage of the funnel to like really add value to their customers and prove the ROI from the investment in their solution. So Hootsuite is a social media management platform where you can unite all your social campaigns in a single tool, distribute them across the right platform at the right time, and then really track that effectiveness of campaigns in real time. So how are they using kind of SimilarWeb today? They're using signals from SimilarWeb to do a few different things. So the first is to, their entire account management team is advising clients on their competitive positioning. So for example, who's the social media leader in each market relative within their competitors? What are the gaps between them and their customers? It's also very powerful for them to show their clients what works well for their competitors and what doesn't. So almost like learning from their customers' mistakes, and then really consulting clients on their optimal social strategy and delivering those actionable recommendations for improvement. And what they've really seen with this is it actually moves Hootsuite's AM team from being an account management team with another vendor more to like a trusted advisor who's got their back on their marketing strategy as well. They can advise them not just on social, but kind of all other marketing channels. So it really increases the credibility of their team, and it makes execs who come to the QBRs, rather than it just being another standard QBR, it's something they look forward to and something that they get key takeaways from and actionable ways that they can improve their business as well. So I think it's a really effective use of signals at this stage as well. And I think at this stage, it's very easy to think, oh, we've got the customer, we don't necessarily need to use signals that much. But we all know, I think the renewal is almost as hard as the new sale sometimes.
100%. 100%. Cool. So Greg, did you want to talk about kind of the types of signals that folks might want to really focus on in terms of just their customers and the retention phase?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think here we've got a lot of passive signals, and you will see some repetition of what we've spoken about before. But again, it's thinking about how the value your business provides, and actually what signals are a good fit at each stage. Maybe the same signal will be a good fit at multiple stages of the funnel, maybe at one but not the other. It's kind of really up to the value you provide. So let's just go through a few of them quickly. So tech stack integrations. I always think this is like a great one, because if you see your customer has just implemented a new technology that you integrate with, maybe you can then work with them to set that integration up. The value for your customer increases the value of both the solutions. And for you, it also makes it more sticky. If the customer is getting more value, they're much more likely to renew and expand with you. So if maybe they've just purchased a new CRM, if they've just purchased Salesforce, for example, and you have a Salesforce connector pre-built, work with them to install it so they can get value kind of from both solutions. Traffic and engagement, another one again. So really valuable here is actually, instead of looking for the business pain that a customer sees that might be having a traffic engagement, is actually showing, look, since you started working with us, your traffic has, if traffic is what you optimize, your traffic has increased X%. If you sell a conversion optimization tool, your conversions have increased X%. Like whatever it is, use that signal just to remind your customer of the value that they're getting from your product or service. And then news events as well are another one that I think are probably underlooked sometimes, but are very, very valuable. So looking at those kind of high level changes in your customer. So maybe they've got new leadership, maybe they've just announced funding, or they've announced a change of strategy. Could this affect your renewal or provide scope of expansion? So if you sell a marketing technology and there's a new CMO that comes in, maybe you need to build a relationship with that new C-level exec who might be the decision maker on the renewal. If they've announced they're going to expand to new markets, maybe that's a great opportunity for you to expand the relationship with the customer and help them achieve that business strategy as well. So if we just go to the next slide, a quickly deep dive on one example here. So here we're using the example of increasing social traffic. So obviously Hootsuite's the core value they provide to their customers, improving the presence on social media and the importance of that marketing channel. So here we're looking at IKEA.com, and we can see here that 2019 to 2020, they saw a large increase in traffic. I think it was like 18 to 25 million from social traffic as well. So really here, it's just a very simple way to prove an ROI. They obviously purchased a social media management tool because they see it as an important channel and they wanted to grow it, and you've helped them achieve that. It's just another one of those things that kind of in your bucket of things to prove the return on the investment for the client that can be really valuable. And now if we just turn it over, we'll go to active signals.
Cool, great. Thanks, Greg. I love all those kinds of stats. Those I nerd out so badly. Love it. So for the retention stage of the buying journey, a lot of the same signals are going to be useful here, similarly to what we saw on the passive signal side. But specifically any kind of signal that shows an indication of exploration, especially with your competition, should and can be closely monitored with signals. So for this stage specifically, some signals that I might want to keep my eye out for if I was a CSM or an RM or somebody just managing customer relationships would be number one, comparisons, especially if you have comparison page signals occurring multiple times with a specific company. This could have kind of show you an indication of somebody starting to compare you and see how you stack up to other players in the field, essentially. And then another way that you can do something very similar is through the alternatives page. So we're actually going to talk about this one in a brief second, so don't want to give too much away here, but this one's very valuable as well. And then finally, any kind of product and usage analytics, whether they're good or bad, can be a really good insight into like the health of your account. And you're probably doing this already, but you can take or use this signal essentially to kind of keep tabs on the likelihood of renewal and if there are any kind of hiccups that you might need to face as you start talking and have those conversations. So let's get into the G2 alternative page signals. So I'm going to say this is my favorite one. I think I've said this about all of them, but I really do believe the alternatives page is the untapped like treasure chest of all signals, especially if you're an RM or a CSM. So for those that are not super familiar with the alternatives page, essentially this is a page that can show the top, I guess, alternative products to the main company that somebody is searching for. So I think the most interesting component of the alternatives page signal is how people get there. So typically someone will get to this is they are searching on maybe Google or what have you, or any kind of search engine. They're searching for X company competitors or X company alternatives, and they can be served up a page like this. So if somebody is directly searching for those kinds of terms, this is a really strong indication that they might be unhappy with your current relationship, and it might be time for you to maybe kind of talk with them and see what's happening, or if there is anything that you can kind of do to mediate the situation. And again, I think it's all about kind of opening that engagement in a relevant and effective manner. And if you know that they're doing this, then you guys can have a really productive conversation in the future. So for our last snippet, we've got a couple examples for how you can kind of engage with a retention or a customer rather with signals.
Yeah, so let's start with the passive signal here. So we're going to think back to the IKEA example, which we just saw before with their social media traffic. So actually here we're using two types of signals. So the first is that we're just showing the impact that we had. So we're saying, I just wanted to reach out to share that since we started working together, IKEA's social traffic has increased more than 45%. So just kind of a way of saying, look at what the value we've provided to you so far is. Then we make it even better by showing a competitive insight by saying, actually, one of your direct competitors during the same period has declined by 12%. So not only have we increased, but when the industry is going the other way as well. So look what an amazing job. Don't you want to renew with us? That, and then we'll pass over to the active signal.
Cool. Yeah, and so for the active signal, if we kind of use that alternatives signal again, you can actually craft something probably similar to what you see here to start engaging with your customer. So again, a look at an alternatives page should probably raise some red flags if you're an RM or a CSM, and it's probably time for you to kind of make sure that the health of the account is in a good state. So there are a couple things you can do. Obviously, you want to open the lines of communication and maybe offer talking about what's happened in the last few months or any value adds that have occurred in the previous 6 months, what have you. But then additionally, you can lightly kind of touch them and push them and let them know that you're still a leader in the category through any kind of unbiased thought leadership. Again, that whole trusted advisor concept, I think, is a really interesting one, even when you get onto the RM and the CSM side. So again, just kind of establishing yourself as a leader in the category, if that is true, can really help, again, get that confidence back up with your customer. And then again, I think the most important thing is to engage them at this point in time and get them on the phone and talking. So we've gone through a whole lot. So Greg, before we kind of hop into Q&A really fast, do you want to kind of talk about what we've learned over the course of this 50 minutes?
Yeah, sure. So just want to recap on what we've seen today. So we've seen that there are many different types of signals that are available to us through every stage of the sales process. We've also talked a bit about how different types of signals apply differently at different stages of that buying journey, and those signals will differ depending on the value that you're providing to your prospects or customers. We've also looked at some real life examples of how customers are using signals, and hope that we've been able to give you some examples of how you might weave those signals in to the different customer communication. Obviously, sometimes it's great to have signals where you've got a bit of inside information on the client before you have that conversation. Other times you want to overtly say, I've seen this and I think you'd get great value from us because of that reason. So hopefully you found that useful.
Cool. And so I think we're ready to go on to Q&A. We've got a few.
We do. So been asked, how granular can you get with specifying the profile of your prospect that you're interested in getting the signals for? Cool. So I guess I can answer this from a SimilarWeb perspective, and I'll pass over to Caitlin to answer it from a G2 perspective. So for the signals in SimilarWeb, you basically can look at any website in the world. So you can look at your customer or your prospect's website, but also that of their competitors as well. And you can see a lot of information about them. You can see the amount of web traffic they get, all the different marketing channels they use, which one's the most effective. You can cut it by geography. You can then also go granularly down into that. So if you see that they're using a lot of organic search, what are the keywords driving traffic? Social, what are the social networks, for example? We also show you the tech stack that they're using as well, that they have installed on their site. And we have a series of alerts as well that can notify you to key changes in your prospects as well. So we've built a series of tools to help you manage your prospects and actually get pushed these signals when they matter most. So the idea is that you don't actually have to do the searching for signals yourself. We'll push those to you at the right time.
Yep. And I think it's very similar on the G2 side. You can obviously, to make them, I guess, accessible to you, you can set up notifications and all that good stuff. But specifically to, I guess, how granular we get in terms of the information associated to an intent signal, I think, one, it depends on the specific signal, but usually what you get is the company name. And then if you're using a comparison signal, for example, you'll get the other folks that are associated to it. And then we also have multiple integrations that allow you to essentially use the intent data that you have to kind of match specific contacts. So if you're using Sales LinkedIn Navigator, Cognism, Clearbit, what have you, you can actually use a lot of this intent data and get the specific contacts that you can reach out to at these given companies.
Perfect. And that actually brings us on very nicely to the next question, which is, for those of us in marketing, do you have any recommendations on how we can support the sales team with intent signals? So I think this is like a really great question, and it's always the balance between optimizing the sales process, but not overwhelming the sales reps and distracting them from the core job of selling. So yeah, there's many ways that you can kind of push these signals to them. I think one is by investing in a product that can help push the right signal at the right time to your reps. And the other is utilizing the CRM effectively. So a lot of our customers will enrich their accounts with different with kind of traffic data, or they'll enrich it with different changes in their book of business, and that will help them prioritize those leads and push the right ones to the sales team at the right time. There's also that when you get an inbound lead in, there's the element of just scoring it with many different signals. So that could be how much traffic they get, what industries they belong to, have they visited your G2 profile page, etc., and then building a score based on that. And once it reaches a certain threshold, pushing it to the right team as well. So I think there's kind of many ways that you can do that. But for me, the way I'd start is just by thinking probably what's the most important 2 or 3 signals that I believe will really move the needle, and starting with those and then building on top of those. Caitlin, if you've got anything else to add on that.
Yeah, and I actually was a G2 customer back at one of my previous companies. So we kind of talked about this a lot. And one of the things that I guess that we did, and then we've also, like when I talked to Digital River as well and other people, people use these intent signals, especially on the marketing side, to, again, kind of build a really refined and engaged audience in their databases. So Digital River actually leverages buyer intent signals to kind of add and create and build account lists for their sales teams. So that's a really nice way to help. And if you're not able to do anything that's really data related, I think really kind of understanding the signals that your sales folks are seeing, you can actually just build messaging, like we had showed those messaging signal or messaging snippets throughout the presentation. If you just kind of give some guidance as to how somebody should engage when they see these signals, that could be a really valuable tool for the sales team. And then again, you can definitely do campaigns to do some air cover with the same kind of signals and accounts that are coming through buyer intent, through any kind of integration that you're using, like a Marketo or a HubSpot or what have you. But really the sky's the limit. And I think it's just about, again, like Greg said, supporting how the sales team kind of wants to use them, and then also kind of not overwhelming them with too much information, but making sure that whatever you're providing them is really targeted, relevant, and refined.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think I'd just add to that is you probably are already using signals
Yeah.
in your organization, but you just don't recognize it. So and like, you also have like a lot of internal signals that you use day in, day out. Like a great example is product analytics. Like, are you focusing your sales or your account management team around the usage of your product? That's a perfect signal. It's a signal of that's often strongly correlated with chance of renewal. So do think about how you're effectively utilizing signals already and the channels that you distribute that to your go-to-market teams. And then when you maybe use like, oh, I would like to invest in a SimilarWeb or a G2 signal, you can distribute them in the same means, the way that a rep is already used to consuming that information to help them prioritize who they're going to reach out to. They can put together the perfect deal, match products to customers and things like that as well. So do have that kind of internal reflection as well. So I think we've got time for one more question. So that is, should I actively mention these signals to my clients or prospects? What do you think, Caitlin?
So I think it's definitely, I would say it definitely depends on the specific signals. I think maybe on the passive side, you could probably talk about them explicitly, like how Greg showed some of these examples. I think on the G2 side, when you're using those intent signals, saying that you saw that somebody did something at a specific time and that you're giving very specific information about that, that might come off as a little off-putting to somebody. So like, as you saw in those messaging examples, you can definitely leverage the information you had, whether it be through comparison signals or what have you. But you might want to just be a little more light to the touch and maybe just establish yourself again as a category leader, or just like opening up the kind of discussion with them so that you can talk to them more specifically. But I probably wouldn't explicitly say that I saw that you did something very specifically at a specific time through buyer intent that our team is using. Perfect. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you there. And I think we gave some examples there that were very email focused, but obviously you can use signals. Signals are useful in many, many different interactions with customers. It could be an email where you're directly mentioning, particularly on the competitive insight that you've seen it, but it could be that you just understand from the signals that maybe their biggest competitor is, in the Boohoo example, their biggest competitor is ASOS, and you just know that information. So when you're having discussions with them, you can mention, maybe you already work with ASOS. That's great to drop their name in to basically just increase the incentive for them to start working with you. I think it's really about gauging it to the situation. I think it's not, sometimes for sure you can share the signals that you get, but you just have to gauge how that would go down with the customer. But it's always useful to have all the signals kind of in your back pocket, so you've got that information about those customers. Perfect. So we are at the hour. So I just want to thanks everyone for joining. We hope you found it useful and informative. As Caitlin mentioned, we'll be circulating the recording after this call as well, so you can watch back or share with colleagues. Yeah, so I just want to thank Caitlin for being a great co-host, and yeah, looking forward to speaking with some of you soon.
Awesome. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks.